There is a version of Randy Orton that this industry has always feared most. Not the young, reckless Randy Orton who was handed the world championship at 24 and spent years figuring out what to do with the gift of generational talent. Not the deranged, punt-wielding Randy Orton, who went through a period so dark and so genuinely unsettling that people questioned whether he was the most dangerous human being in professional wrestling history. Not even the beloved, crowd-favorite Randy Orton who spent years as a babyface and reminded everyone why they fell in love with this character in the first place. The version that this industry fears most is the one we are watching right now. The version that combines everything. The 20-plus years of ring intelligence. The complete mastery of pace, of timing, of psychological manipulation inside a professional wrestling match. The cold, detached, almost clinical efficiency of a predator who has hunted this specific landscape for so long that nothing in it surprises him anymore. Nothing slows him down. Nothing throws him off. Nothing makes him question for even 1 second that he is exactly where he belongs and that the title around his waist is exactly where it belongs. This version of Randy Orton. The 2026 version, the undisputed WWE Champion version. The man who has just dismantled Cody Rhodes on back-to-back SmackDown appearances and done it in ways that have left the wrestling world simultaneously awed and deeply, genuinely troubled. This version is operating at a frequency that most of the WWE universe was not fully prepared for. And here is the thing that makes it even more extraordinary, even more worth sitting down and analyzing properly and thoroughly. Randy Orton doing this to Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, the man who finished the story, the champion whose reign represented an emotional promise to a fan base that had invested years in his journey, is not just a great villain winning a championship. It is a philosophical statement. It is the apex predator declaring, in the most concrete and undeniable terms possible, that professional wrestling does not reward the purest heart or the most compelling story or the most emotionally resonant journey. It rewards the person who, when the moment comes, strikes faster and hits harder than anyone else in the room. And Randy Orton strikes faster and hits harder than anyone. Now, add to all of this the most electrically charged subplot running through SmackDown right now. Roman Reigns' reaction. The tribal chief watching all of this unfold. The man who built the undisputed WWE Championship into the most prestigious prize in professional wrestling observing, with that specific Roman Reigns expression that communicates 17 different things simultaneously, the man who now holds his title destroying the man who took it from him. And factor in WrestleMania 42, the destination that everything in WWE is currently being written toward. The grandest stage of them all, and the question of who stands on top of that stage with the undisputed WWE Championship is now one of the most genuinely compelling, most widely discussed, most unpredictable questions in all of sports entertainment. Friends, we have a tremendous amount of ground to cover today. I have been watching WWE since around 2002, nearly 24 years. And I can tell you with absolute conviction that the story being told right now on Friday Night SmackDown is one of the richest, most layered, most genuinely exciting stories this company has produced in a very long time. So let's do what we do here. Let's go deep. Let's go thorough. Let's make sure that when this video is over, you understand every layer of what's happening and why it matters. Here we go. Before we dive into the events of March 21st, before we analyze what Randy Orton did to Cody Rhodes on that specific Friday night and what Roman Reigns' reaction to it tells us about where this story is heading, we need to establish context. Specifically, the March 15th SmackDown, which sits between the original championship win and the March 21st destruction, and which is an essential piece of understanding the trajectory of this entire story. Because March 15th wasn't just filler between major events. March 15th was the SmackDown episode where the real character of this championship reign and the real character of this rivalry began to crystallize, where Randy Orton as undisputed WWE champion started making his philosophical statement not just through winning, but through how he presented himself in victory, how he spoke about Cody Rhodes, how he positioned himself as a champion. And what emerged from March 15th was a portrait of a Randy Orton championship mentality that I want to describe carefully, because it's the key to understanding everything that followed on March 21st. Randy Orton as undisputed WWE champion in 2026 does not celebrate the way most champions celebrate. There is no explosive jubilation, no extended pyro-soaked moment of pure joy at having achieved something. The Randy Orton we are watching now doesn't celebrate because he doesn't view winning the championship as an achievement in the traditional sense. He views it as a restoration, as the natural state of things being corrected. The championship was away from him for a period. Now it is back. The world makes sense again. The apex predator is at the top of the food chain. Of course he has the championship. What other outcome was ever truly logical? That psychology. That cold, settled certainty that championship gold is simply where it belongs when it is around his waist, is perhaps the most effective tool in Randy Orton's character arsenal right now. Because it removes from him the vulnerability of desperation. He is not striving. He is not grinding. He is not fighting against the odds. He is simply being what he is. And what he is, as March 15th reminded everyone and March 21st confirmed emphatically, is the most dangerous person on Friday Night SmackDown. Let me talk about Cody Rhodes going into March 21st, because his psychological and physical state coming into this match is absolutely essential to understanding what happened inside that ring. Losing the undisputed WWE Championship is, for any champion, a significant blow. But for Cody Rhodes specifically, for a man whose entire character identity is built around the concept of legacy, of finishing what was started, of making the right ending happen through sheer force of will and refusal to surrender, losing the championship carries a specific weight that goes beyond the practical reality of no longer being the title holder. It is an identity challenge. A direct, specific challenge to the narrative that Cody Rhodes has been telling about himself and his career since the moment he returned to WWE. The story he has been telling is one of heart triumphing over adversity, of the right person eventually standing at the top because the right people always find their way there if they refuse to quit. Randy Orton winning the RKO from nowhere and taking that championship challenged that narrative at its foundation. Because the RKO doesn't care about heart. It doesn't care about legacy or story arc or emotional investment. It happens to whoever is in front of Randy Orton when Randy Orton decides it happens. There is no narrative justice in the RKO. There is only physics and timing and the terrifying randomness of a move that strikes without warning. So how does Cody Rhodes, a character built on the power of narrative, on the idea that the right story reaches the right ending, respond to an opponent whose greatest weapon is the absence of narrative? The opponent who wins precisely because the story didn't see it coming. That is the psychological battlefield that March 21st was fought on. And understanding it makes everything that happened in that match more meaningful. Cody Rhodes going into March 21st was a man trying to reimpose his narrative on a situation that had violently rejected it. He was trying to find the story structure in a rivalry where his opponent doesn't operate within story structures. He was trying to out-heart someone who doesn't operate on heart. And that fundamental incompatibility between what Cody Rhodes does and what Randy Orton does is the source of everything that made March 21st one of the most dramatic and emotionally complex pieces of television that SmackDown has produced this year. The championship match on March 21st. Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship told a story that I want to walk through completely and carefully, because every phase of this match communicated something essential about the characters, the rivalry, and the direction of the story going forward. The opening of the match was defined by something that immediately separated this contest from most championship rematches in modern wrestling. Genuine intensity from the first second. No feeling out period. No establishing exchanges where both men test the waters before committing to a strategy. Cody Rhodes came into this match with a specific personal urgency that communicated itself in every movement, every decision, every fraction of a second choice he made from the opening bell. He needed to reclaim this championship. Not just wanted to, needed to. And that need visible in every accelerated choice, every willingness to take risks that a more methodical approach might counsel against, was both his greatest weapon and his most dangerous vulnerability going into this match. Because here is what Randy Orton has always understood about hunger, about urgency, about the need that comes from a performer whose identity is tied to a championship. It creates exploitable patterns. When someone needs something desperately, they move toward it in predictable ways. The hunger becomes a compass that an intelligent opponent can read. And Randy Orton, after 20+ years in this ring, is the most sophisticated reader of exploitable patterns in professional wrestling today. So as Cody came out fast, came out with intensity, came out with everything his character has, Randy Orton watched, processed, and waited. The early portion of the match was, on the surface, appearing to favor Cody Rhodes. He was connecting with offense. He was hitting the cross-Rhodes setup attempts. He was generating crowd responses that grew louder with every near-momentum shifting moment. And the live SmackDown crowd was completely with him, the loyal, passionate SmackDown audience roaring every time it looked like the American Nightmare was getting close to his reclamation. But underneath that surface narrative, underneath the energy and the crowd noise and Cody's fire, Randy Orton was moving on the board. Every time he took a piece of offense, he was filing it, learning, mapping, building the architecture of a response that wasn't going to come in the first 5 minutes, wasn't going to come at the most obvious moment, was going to come at the exact instant when Cody Rhodes felt most certain that he had found his rhythm and was on his way back. The mid-match sequence shifted the atmosphere in that arena significantly. Randy Orton, having absorbed enough of what Cody was bringing, began to impose himself. And when Randy Orton begins to impose, when he starts working from his specific brand of cold, methodical, psychologically devastating offense, the entire texture of a match changes. The pace drops. The stakes feel heavier. Every move he makes carries with it the suggestion of something worse coming. The draping DDT, his signature setup move, the one that positions an opponent in that specific vulnerable state before the RKO, landed on Cody Rhodes to one of the most complex crowd reactions of the night. Noise that combined genuine alarm with almost involuntary appreciation for the execution, the timing, the absolute mastery with which Randy Orton hits that move after more than 20 years of doing it. And then came the period of the match that I want to spend the most time on. Because this section, what I'll describe as the psychological center of March 21st, is where the storytelling was at its most sophisticated and its most revealing. Randy Orton had Cody Rhodes in a position of genuine difficulty. The offense had been absorbed. The momentum had shifted. The crowd's energy, which had been so strongly in Cody's corner in the opening minutes, was now held in suspension. Not gone at all, but held. Waiting. The way a crowd holds its breath when it genuinely doesn't know how this resolves. And Cody Rhodes dug. The way only Cody Rhodes can dig. With that specific quality of his character. The refusal, the absolute immovable refusal to concede that the story is over, he began to fight back. Not with technique at that moment. Not with a strategic plan carefully executed. With heart. With everything he is as a character poured into every counter, every escape, every moment where he refused to stay down when staying down would have been the easier choice. The arena responded to that with the kind of noise that reminds you why professional wrestling, at its best, generates emotional responses that no other form of entertainment can replicate. And then Randy Orton heard the noise, felt the momentum tilting, saw Cody Rhodes rising, and the RKO happened. Now I want to talk about this specific RKO, the March 21st RKO. Because while the RKO that won Randy Orton the championship was devastating and shocking and produced one of the most dramatic moments in recent SmackDown history, this RKO on March 21st was something different. Something more. And I think the reason it was different is worth examining carefully. The first RKO, the championship-winning one, landed in a specific context. It landed when Cody Rhodes was at full capacity, when the match had been competitive, when the finish came with the suddenness that all great RKOs carry. It was shocking because of the randomness, the speed, the way it converted a moment of Cody's momentum into an instant, complete reversal. The March 21st RKO was different because of what preceded it. Because by the time it landed, the story of the match had built in a specific direction. Cody Rhodes had shown genuine courage and genuine fire. He had climbed back from a difficult mid-match position with everything his character has. He had given that SmackDown crowd reason to believe, not just hope, but genuinely believe, that the story was resolving itself the way the story was supposed to resolve. And then it didn't. When a crowd has been built up toward a specific emotional payoff and that payoff is denied, when everything in the storytelling has pointed toward one conclusion and a different conclusion arrives, the reaction is one of the most powerful emotional responses professional wrestling can generate. It is not just disappointment. It is the specific, acute feeling of narrative betrayal, of a promise being broken, of a certainty being revealed as an illusion. That feeling, that sharp, collective, "No, not again," that swept through the SmackDown arena when the RKO landed and the 3 count followed, is exactly what made this championship defense so much more resonant than the original title win. Because the original title win was shock. Shock is powerful, but it's simple. What March 21st produced was something more complex. The beginning of genuine dread. The audience starting to process the possibility that Randy Orton winning the Undisputed Championship might not be a transitional moment in the Cody Rhodes story. That it might be the beginning of a very different kind of chapter. That the apex predator, with this championship around his waist and this specific brand of intelligent, patient, completely prepared dominance, might be here to stay. Genuine dread in a championship rivalry is one of the rarest and most valuable storytelling commodities in professional wrestling. March 21st planted it in the SmackDown audience's consciousness. And it's going to grow. The championship victory on March 21st would have been, by itself, a significant and memorable moment. Clean title defense. A confirmation that the Orton championship era is not a transitional blip but a genuine, sustained thing. A reminder that the RKO will always be there, always be dangerous, always be capable of ending anything at any moment. But Randy Orton did not stop there. What happened after the championship defense, the post-match destruction of Cody Rhodes, is what elevated the entire night from a great SmackDown episode to a genuinely historic one. And I want to break down every element of it, because this is where Randy Orton made his most comprehensive statement. The post-match attack on Cody Rhodes was not explosive. It was not frantic. It did not have the energy of someone who has been overcome by rage and is lashing out in an uncontrolled way. And that specific quality, the controlled, purposeful, deeply deliberate nature of what Randy Orton did to Cody Rhodes after the bell, is precisely what made it so effective as a piece of character work. Every great villain in professional wrestling history has a specific flavor to their cruelty. Some are explosive and chaotic, you never know what they'll do next because they barely know themselves. Some are arrogant and dismissive, they hurt people as an expression of contempt, as a way of demonstrating that their opponents aren't worth taking seriously. Some are motivated by specific, personal hatred that makes their violence feel emotionally charged and raw. Randy Orton's post-match destruction of Cody Rhodes on March 21st didn't fit any of those templates. What it communicated was something both simpler and more disturbing than any of them. It communicated purpose. The specific, cold, absolutely clear purpose of a predator ensuring that there is no ambiguity about the hierarchy. Making certain that when Cody Rhodes eventually rises from that mat, and Cody Rhodes always rises because that's who he is, he rises with the full, physical, undeniable understanding of exactly where he stands relative to Randy Orton. The dismantling was methodical, deliberate. Every moment of it communicated that Randy Orton was not out of control. He was fully, completely in control, and this was a choice. An intentional, calculated, message-sending choice. Not revenge for anything specific. Not an emotional reaction to something Cody did. Just the apex predator making absolutely certain that his prey understands what has happened to it. And Cody Rhodes lying in the middle of that ring at the end of it, the American Nightmare, the man with the biggest heart in professional wrestling, the champion who finished the story, lying there in the wreckage of what Randy Orton had done to him in front of that SmackDown crowd, is an image that is going to define this rivalry for as long as it runs. Because it poses a question that professional wrestling has always been most powerful at posing. How does a person who is built entirely on the power of refusing to stay down respond to someone who is specifically, systematically, deliberately designed to make staying down feel like the only reasonable option? And now, the moment that the entire wrestling internet has been discussing since March 21st. The moment that is, I believe, the single most important piece of storytelling information delivered not just on this SmackDown but in the entire current WWE narrative. Roman Reigns' reaction to Randy Orton destroying Cody Rhodes. Let me say something up front about how I approach this because I think it's important context. When I analyze Roman Reigns' reactions in this kind of backstage or observational capacity, when I look at what he communicates through expression, through body language,